17 months. That's how long the triplets were on bottles. And now, here we are in August 2025, and it's all finally over. Howie, please cue the music. Just kidding. No celebratory music for this episode, because as great as it is to not have bottles, it's still a bittersweet feeling. So I'll continue on that. So now I say goodbye to all the bottles we have to prep, all the bottles we have to wash, and watching those little Chub Scouts sit on their snuggle me's and down their bottles. All that is over. When we brought them home from the NICU, we were doing at least 24 bottles a day, minimum. It was constant. Wash, dry, prep, repeat. Honestly, that was probably one of the hardest parts of having triplets, just the sheer amount of bottle duty. And that was just from my perspective as dad. For Elizabeth, add in the pumping on top of it, because she had to constantly pump in the beginning. Like I mentioned before, every 2 hours, she was pumping to get her supply up, to make sure, we had enough breast milk for all the girls. Now that's all behind us, though. The days are long, but the weeks and years fly by. Thank you for tuning in, and welcome back to another episode of the Triplet Double podcast. My name is Isaiah Hernandez, and I am the proud father of 5 kids under the age of 5. 2 singletons, Logan and Layden, and of course my triplets, Amelia, Samara, and Nora. It's good to be back behind the mic after missing last week. I wanted to take a moment and thank you all who have been a part of this journey with me. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe to my podcast and follow along on social media. You can find me on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Threads under the handle @Triplet Double. Let's move on with the rest of the show. Hang in there. I promise to not make you guys cry too much. Just a little bit. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just going to share a little bit about a big milestone, as you may have guessed based off my opening. We are done with bottles. And this didn't really hit me until a couple days after the girls were done. The last couple of months, they were only taking 1 bottle a day, and that was around 3 p.m. in the afternoon. So during the weekdays, I'm still at work, so I missed their last feed, except on the weekends. It was just weird. Only on the weekends I'd see them eat a bottle. So then, the other night, while the kids were asleep, Logan and Layden were down, the triplets were down. I walked into the kitchen and picked up a couple bottles the girls had been playing with earlier. And, first instinct is to put them away, either the dishwasher or the pantry. So I take them to the pantry, and Elizabeth tells me, hey, those don't go there anymore. And that's when it really sank in. I was like, oh yeah, they don't. And, when I had looked at that, when I had stopped to see that, to think and look at the bottles, and, I looked at the pantry and it was completely empty, where it was replaced with another item, no longer filled with the bottles. That's when it really sank in. This stage is over. This whole era of our life is done. And you guys may be thinking well, not if you have another one, or you can always have more. And my answer to that is no. We knew ahead of time when pregnant with the triplets that it was time, to hang them up. I had actually scheduled my vasectomy prior to them being born, and I scheduled it. I think the earliest I was able to do was probably May, I think. So, a couple months after they were born. So I do that, and, long story short, I wasn't paying attention, and, this will forever be part of the story of my vasectomy, with Elizabeth especially, because I was dumb and I was not thinking more bigger than myself, of course. And I scheduled the vasectomy, and I scheduled it May 11th, and I was like, yeah, May 11th is fine. I was talking to the office admin, and so I scheduled it May 11th, and after I tell Elizabeth, she's like, that's Mother's Day weekend, and I had scheduled it Mother's Day weekend. So that was just a funny story. My mom was laughing about that, and Elizabeth laughs and teases me about that all the time. So I made Mother's Day weekend, which should have been about Elizabeth. It was about me also, because I was being a little bit of a wimp after the vasectomy. So, and that's another funny story I'll get into, because that whole vasectomy procedure, that may be my next episode. There's some good little laughs about that, but I'll get into that later. So I had actually, and even still tying back into the vasectomy story, one of the doctors, while we were getting ready to deliver the girls, she had actually came in and she checked on us, all that, right? And then she kind of got into a bit of a parenting moment, even though, Elizabeth and I are 30, but, still, I guess 30 is the new 20. We'd been in there in the room, and she had come up to us and, checked on Elizabeth, did all of her readings and all that. And then she said, hey, you guys got a plan figured out? Because when you have multiples once spontaneously, like how we did, she's like, the chances increase. So she's like, you got to be smart, and you got to make sure that basically don't do this again, because the toll it takes on the body and the risk that goes into a multiples pregnancy, it's just way too much. And also it's like, she knew we have five, we're going to have 5 kids now. So she's like, come on guys, like hang them up. Like, you don't, in the nice direct way that a doctor can tell you. Right. So she brought that up, and I was like, yeah, I got my vasectomy scheduled, a couple months. She's like, well, that's good, because most will not, like most men won't, so she's like, she's like, I'm glad you're doing it. She was talking to Elizabeth. She's like, yeah, you got one of the lucky ones. So that was always a funny story, because she had come in a little sassy, direct, a little bit of that parenting tone, but ultimately she was looking out for us and Elizabeth, because that was good. And I think with our last 3 experiences, or I should say the previous 2 experiences with Logan and Layden, it always feels like the mom gets the short end of the stick, and that's tough because they're the ones carrying the team throughout this whole pregnancy. So that was a good moment. If you would have asked me 17 months ago, are you ready to be done with bottles? I would have been like, yep, peace, see you later. You know what I mean? Like, get those bottles, I'm done. But even now I still say yes, because like I look back and I still remember the hard times about it. But at the same time, I'm sad, because it really flew by. In the beginning, the days felt so long. 1 month in, 2 months in, 3 months in, every day felt like a marathon. I think most parents can relate to that. Like I said earlier, the days are long, but the weeks, honestly, they fly by. And now I look up and I've got 2 kids starting school, which is crazy, because usually, you get to pull the Band-Aid off and just do 1 at a time. Now I got 2 starting, and that's just wild to me now. 5 kids under 5, and already 2 of them are off to school. Time robs you of those little moments. I'd love to go back for just 1 day and see any of my kids at that tiny stage, drinking bottles again. I miss how small they were. I miss them as babies. But the baby era is officially over in our house. And that's okay. Elizabeth and I have come to terms that we are done having kids. So thinking back with Logan, we had to wake him every 2 to 3 hours to feed him. Now, remember I mentioned this earlier, but he was underweight, about 5 pounds, 14 ounces. And if it was up to Logan, he would have slept through the night. But we had to wake him up to make sure he got enough to eat. And that one was tough, because I think when you go from being not a parent to waking up and having to feed a baby every 2 to 3 hours, especially when you don't really have any previous experience, like I never had that experience, that really hits you like a rock, because that's a big change for me. Elizabeth, she's just so much better at all those things. She was always an early bird. She has just always been like sharper when it came to waking up. Me, when it comes to waking up, it's just like I'm like a zombie. I'm like just a giant Snorlax. Just I can't move. Like it's hard, and that was a bit of a process. So I think that's why Logan's was tough. I think after we got through Logan and then we had Layden and the triplets, it got easier, but challenging in their own ways. So, that was Logan's background. Like Logs was a little guy. And with Layden, it was pretty much the opposite. She was over 9 pounds. She was a big girl. And her cheeks were so round, I used to call her Kirby. And I'll show this picture later. There's a picture of her yawning, like the first night she was born. And she's all snuggled, like, she's swaddled, has a beanie on. And she's yawning. and her cheeks are so round, and she looks like Kirby when he's swallowing a character and stealing their powers. Really funny. That's one of my all-time favorite pictures. So compared to Logan, she was easy because she would sleep through the night. Honestly, she really would. If we didn't have to wake up at least once to feed her, she would have slept 9 times out of 10. But she was just, in general, just pretty smooth. Like, she downed bottles pretty easy. Like, it was all good. And Elizabeth was, her supply was great. And so, like, when it came to breastfeeding, it was just super easy. And then came the triplets. And that was like getting hit with a wrecking ball. And I'm not exaggerating. I don't think there's no amount of prep that goes into this. You can be Batman himself, and Batman cannot feed. He cannot mentally be ready to feed triplets. I mean, if you know Batman, he's got everything down. But I think with triplets, even himself would be like, all right, we got to figure this out. And get Alfred involved too, because you need more than one man. So nothing really prepares you for the triplets. And it doesn't matter how many kids you've had before. I've had 2 before we had the triplets, and nothing got us ready for that. It's just a completely different beast. And you may have kids close in age. Well, close in age does not equal multiples, because again, they're in different stages. So Amelia and Nora came home first after just a couple weeks in the NICU. They were tiny, smaller than Logan had been, and we had to feed them about every 2 to 3 hours. So that one was already going back a little bit, to the Logan days. So, and that's hard because, again, you got more. It's not just one; you got 2 now. So that was a little different. So you always had to have 2 people get up when it came down to feeding. And then Samara was a bit of a different story. So we had shared, I think in my first episode, I shared about Samara's growth restriction that she had faced, and so that obviously could cause her to be very small, like under 2 pounds small. She was like 1 pound 9 ounces at birth. And she had spent 90 days in the NICU. So her diet, when she had came home, she was a little over 5 pounds. That was the criteria to get out of the NICU. Well, she's barely over 5 pounds, and she's almost 4 months old. Well, she's still smaller than Logan was, like when Logan was born. So just put that in perspective. So Samara still needed that strict every 2 to 3 hour schedule, even around 3 months, by the time she came home. And so now instead of 2, we had 3 babies all needing our attention. And like I mentioned on another episode too, we had done the Snuggle Me Loungers that had allowed us to feed more than one. So the Snuggle Me Loungers, great investment if you're having multiples. And if you also want to look at anything else about multiples, like for must-haves, go back to my episode a couple of weeks ago. I did one about must-haves. So check that out. So the nights were the toughest. And if I remember right, we'd feed at 11. Then again, around 1:30 or 2. And then I think the last feeding of that night stretch was 5 in the morning. And I might be a little foggy on this. And honestly, probably need to get Elizabeth to, correct me, because she'll know for sure. But might be a little, like I said, I'm a little foggy on that. It was a while ago. And regardless, though, it felt nonstop. I mean, we were having to feed every 2 to 3 hours around the clock. So it was busy. And that's where support saved us. My mother-in-law was very clutch in coming in to stay with us because she did not live with us at the time. And so she came and she stayed with us even before the triplets were born to help us, get ready, because we knew that with the triplets that they could have came any moment because it was such a high risk and we were getting monitored every week with an ultrasound. So she had stayed with us for a couple months before and helped us really, get ready, get the house ready, helped with the kids, with Logan and Layden. And then with the girls' feedings, she had helped us because, I was able to do shifts with her, and she had just been another resource. Because if you don't have that resource, it can be done. 2 parents alone can do it, but it's brutal. So having support is the difference between just surviving and actually making it through somewhat sane. So whether you have 1 kid or multiple, try to get the family help involved, at a respectable level to where you're not taking advantage of them, they're not taking advantage of you, you know what I mean. So do it at a respectable level and make sure you guys are on the same page about it, because if you're not, that's where it can get messy. But luckily, we were all on the same page for the most part, and we got it, we survived. We made it. So shout out to Darla Layden. Thank you. So parenting is always tough, but the reward is worth it. You get out what you put in, and when I look back, even though those nights were long and exhausting, I wouldn't trade them. Now, standing here at the end of the bottle stage, I realize how much I'll miss it. The bonding, the routine, even the frustration. It's part of our story. And I know some of you listening are in the thick of it right now, washing bottles, dragging yourself up at 2 a.m. for another feed. You're tired. You're wondering when it ends. And I promise it does. And when it does, you'll look back and realize how fast it went. So that's today's episode. A milestone I wanted to share with you all. 17 months of bottles, and now we are done. Howie, I need that applause sound, please. I don't have a Howie yet, but trust me, once I keep this podcast up, I will hire my own Howie, okay? That will happen. So if you're listening and you're in that early stage, hang in there. Take pictures, make memories, because one day you'll put that last bottle away and realize that stage is gone forever. Thank you for being on this journey with me. This is the Triplet Double podcast. I'm Isaiah Hernandez, dad of 5 under 5. If you have any questions, want to see any topics covered in future episodes, make sure to email me at Isaiah, ISAIAH, @tripletdouble.com. Don't forget to subscribe to wherever you listen to your podcast at. Follow me on social media at Triplet Double, like we mentioned before, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, YouTube. You can find me there. Follow me on all those accounts for any updates. Thank you again for the support. Until next time, appreciate the stage you're in, even when it's hard, because it doesn't last forever.